Good afternoon, everybody, or a good evening, wherever you might be. This is Joseph F. Price in the radio, on the stereo, on the phone, wherever you might be at this moment. We're up in here. So I've got this guy, Jumaikking. I guess you pronounce it Juma King or Juma I King. Fantastic gentleman, gave us the opportunity, privilege to use this wonderful music in the background. So I just want to say thank you to him for that. Hope y'all doing pretty good. Today's date that we're actually doing the recording, it's going to be on July 21st, 2022. And I'm over in Orlando. I think it was like 100. Looking at the computer right now, it's 94 degrees. I think it's going to be raining pretty shortly. So let's get right down to it. One of the things that we try to do is to educate, because that's actually one of the fundamental things that has to happen for a person to rid themselves of, a situation like pornography addiction. And so part of today is about addressing things by using the example of a person. So today, as you may know, I just like law enforcement from the perspective of law enforcement sciences. So if you know me, you know I watch a lot of different programs. We did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on To Catch a Predator and its relationship to pornography. I don't think I did a good job on that in terms of its relationship to pornography. I think I did a halfway decent job in talking about To Catch a Predator, but I'm going to go back to that in a couple weeks and actually tie that back into the relationship between pornography, because I would almost bet the farm that 80% of those people, if not 95% of them, were porn addicts. So today, as I promised, I'm going to talk about, a famous pornography addict of today's modern time. And, the interesting thing is you never heard of it like that, but that's okay, because a lot of what I do is to talk about stuff that you never heard before. You never heard before. That doesn't even mean anything, because you never heard before. That's like a gateway that's something that we need to do something about and address and get a hold of. So I'm going to do the best today to talk about the relationship between pornography and how it actually destroyed, I think, one of the great prodigies in America in the music business. I think he was at the top of the game in R&B. And I'm not really going to do a whole lot of reporting on the story. This particular podcast is going to just like take off with the assumption that you know something about the story. So if you don't know anything about the story, then it's something maybe you can get yourself up to speed with the story so that what it is I'm saying makes more sense to you. Or just take what it is that I say today and run with it, because you really don't need to know the story. The way that we're going to talk about it is we're going to kind of tell the story in how we tell what it is that we're going to tell today. So without the mystery, I'm talking about R. Kelly, the gentleman who got sentenced to 30 years a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was. I'm talking about R. Kelly specifically. And, he really is the great porn addict of modern day. As a matter of fact, I would have to go to say that he's probably one of the most famous porn addicts of the modern day. But again, you don't know him so much as that, or many people don't. So let's give you a little bit of background without the whole story on R. Kelly. So I'm going to do a little reading to help me pull this off. R. Kelly actually is a phenomenal R&B artist. Um, just just a prodigy. I mean, like, well, just phenomenal. If you don't know his music, and some of his music is just inspirational. He wrote a song called "I Believe I Can Fly," which to me was a theme song for a while because, as you know, I like things that motivate you, and it was almost like an anthem of positivity. And people played that at graduations. They played that at sales meetings, sales conferences. They played that when people before people went to the stage. It really was an anthem of positivity. I even played it for some of my millionaire friends, and they thought it was pretty awesome. So he wrote that song back in 1996. So there's been allegations about him and child pornography and him and fooling around with 18, 15-year-old kids, since 1980 something. He allegedly married some girl named Aaliyah at age 15 or 16, some kind of false documentations and such. All kinds of incidences with teenage girls, payoffs, suits and such, settlements, all over the place. And, one of the things, like, as I was looking at some of the documentaries over the weekend, one of the things that a person was saying, Tom Joyner specifically, he was talking about the settlements. And he said, they don't make settlements for nothing. In other words, people that pay settlements, they just don't pay settlements just to pay settlements. They pay settlements because there's something that happens that warrants a payment of a settlement. So just keep that in mind. Back in in 2008, he had some kind of pornography charge, child pornography, which, again, he had some kind of proclivity to young girls, apparently. 2009, he, of course, divorced a wife that was old. It just can go on and on and on. He wrote a lot of good music. And then basically, I think, the thing that really began the process of doing him under was a Lifetime documentary that got all of the various women, or not all of, but many women that had actually been abused by him one way or another. Sometimes they were in their youth, sometimes they weren't, but they got all these women together in a show called Surviving R. Kelly. And the show aired back in 2019, and it aired right around the holiday season, which really was an interesting time because what happened concurrently is that the government shutdown occurred at that time. And so you say, well, what's the relevancy of that? Well, the relevancy of that is a lot of people that were involved in things like the Department of Justice happened to have time off such that they could see this. So it was actually viewed, and people had a lot of time to stew on it. Because, again, there was a government shutdown. It happened right around the holidays. So it got viewed, and it got a lot of people riled up. And so that pretty much was the beginning of the end, and I knew it as an observer that it was the beginning of the end, especially, again, with the timing. I knew it. It just was a matter of time. He was done. So, lo and behold, a couple months down the road, Chicago started with the original charges. I think they filed like an indictment that had something like 13 counts. And there had been all kinds of traveling that was involved. So whenever you got traveling that's involved and young girls involved, you got trafficking involved, and you got federal charges. So he was actually convicted. They actually went racketeering because of his setup, and we'll talk about that as we go. His setup was kind of organized in the way that he was recruiting these young ladies. So they kind of got him on. They got him on the organization 30 years. So that's where he is, and then he also has some state charges. So it's effectively a life sentence, and it is more than effectively what he deserves. Okay. So that more or less is a brief synopsis or analysis of Mr. R. Kelly, and I don't even really think that calling him Mr. Is really even necessary. But anyway, he's a POS, and if you need some help, what a POS is, the P and the O stands for peace, and a O stands for of. So, yeah, let's talk about this. Oh, where do I start? Okay. Not to laugh. Here's where I start. The best place to start with R. Kelly is exactly where it starts. See, R. Kelly was actually a victim of sexual assault. R. Kelly was a victim of sexual assault by some adult neighbor that lived, I guess, in the same building. And there's a saying that hurt people hurt people. So, without the details, because I don't really think they're relevant, this particular subject not only abused R. Kelly, but he also abused others. And see, one of the things, as I said, we're going to tie this into sexual addiction and pornography addiction. And one of the things that seems to be it seems to scream out most of the time with sex addiction and pornography addiction, although not 100% of the time, but pretty much most of the time, and most of the time that I'm going to see. But, just for the record, it doesn't happen all the time. Most of the time, people had some kind of sexual abuse or some kind of early sexual exposure. It's almost like something that has happened, or they've had some type of trauma. So, from the coach's corner, the thing that we always say is that there's usually 3 reasons that a person has this pornography addiction anyway. Is that, 1, it could be opportunity based or opportunity induced. 2, it could be trauma induced. And or 3, it could be attachment induced. It seems like attachment is one of the driving factors that we're finding nowadays. And keep in mind, it could be all 3: opportunity, trauma, and or attachment, all 3 combined. And you're going to find that those they're present among all of the addictions. And I think he had some kind of dad issues. So obviously you got the attachment issue. He stayed in the house all the time. So there you are with him. So he was abused early along. It seemed that as a result of the abuse, he hid out, which is what people tend to do after they're abused. And I guess he figured out how to cope. And early on, his coping strategy became listening to music and playing music and making music and creating music and so forth. And that's actually was the foundation of why he became such a prodigy that he became. Was that it was actually his coping strategy. And then I'm going to just buckshot fast forward. What actually happened in terms of coping strategy is that his money gave him a lot of other opportunities, so that what transformed from his music being his go-to coping strategy to some of this sexual activity that he did. So let's talk about some of this stuff as much as we can in its relationship to Porn Addict. Okay. He filmed stuff that he did with underage girls, by the way. Um, that in and of itself is porn. And then he kept it, and apparently he had like this closet that had nothing but pictures in it and stuff, and movies and so on and so forth. So anybody that's got a CACHE, a cache of pornography, that's a porn addict. I mean, that's not really like something that we're going to be doing any rocket science on. That's a porn addict. Really plain and simple. It's a porn addict. Anybody that keeps pornography, and in his case it was VHS, so apparently he had tapes galore. Now, he knew that he had a problem because which again, like many porn addicts, and at least the ones that we're talking to, they know that they have a problem, but they think that they can fix it on their own, which is what he thought, I guess. He tried to fix it on his own, to no avail. It didn't work. He had made references to people that this could get him in trouble, and he needs to stop. And as he was making these videos, by the way, he was actually making incriminating statements. And I'm not going to say what the statements are for the simple fact that I'm not going to be triggering, and I'm not going to bring that into this particular conversation. But there were a lot of statements that were made where that was part of what he was doing in the video, is actually acknowledging that there was illegality in the work that he was doing. Now, essentially, they said that he, like I said, what he was charged with, the federal charges, was that he was running a sex cult, basically. And so what he was doing, kind of like Epstein was doing, where he had some girls that were victims, and then he was actually paying the victims to go recruit victims. And, victims recruiting victims is actually, I mean, those are actually the best recruiters, because to the potential victims, those are very safe people, the victims. So it's a non-threatening communication that potential victims can get sucked into very easily. So anyway, he recorded the acts. He got charged one time, I don't know, 1996. There's like 2 or 3 times that he got charged with child porn. And then, of course, he bought himself out of it. Now, one of the things that was happening was that I think they were buying people off. So they had people that they were getting involved in some of their sex capades and using them later to help get him out of the trouble once he got in the trouble. So we're going to stop right there. We'll come back. We're talking about one of the greatest or most famous porn addicts of the 21st century. Talking about that clown, R. Kelly. We'll be back in a moment.